What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Reformed Reader, the channel where we review books, movies, TV shows, really any forms of media through the lens of a Christian who is under the authority of the Scripture. And today, we are going to be talking about Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. Now, this is going to be spoiler-free for the most part. There might be some mild things in there, but this is a video to watch prior to reading to see if you think you should or shouldn't read it. Let's talk about what's the story about to begin with. This is a retelling of Rumpelstiltskin. It's unique in the sense that it kind of takes place in our world, I think, in what's Russia in the probably 1600s or so. But yeah, so anyway, the story follows a young woman named Miriam who is trying to earn a living for her family, finds out that she's very good at exchanging goods, and is then challenged by a being to turn his silver to gold for him. And then all kinds of things ensue. If you know the story of Rumpelstiltskin, it's similar, but I wouldn't say it's the same. To call it a retelling is probably maybe a little too generous. I would actually label this more of like, if you were to take one of your favorite books and how they adapt it to TV or movie, how it can sometimes be drastically different with maybe just some undertones. This is similar in that sense. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over the good, the bad, and the ugly. So the good. Let's talk about character first. Characters were great. There were three in particular that I liked reading about. Miriam, Wanda, and I think it's Irina is how you pronounce her name. I did enjoy reading about those. Wanda in particular, I thought her story was unique in comparison to the other two. The other two kind of blended together a little bit, but the characters were good. I did like that this was a female-led book that didn't seem like it was just doing it for the sake of being female-led. It actually was probably the most appropriate choice. The plot's pretty good. I think there's definitely some times where it's lacking a little bit, or maybe seem like maybe she's more of that Naomi Novik's more of a discovery writer, and just a few times it kind of seemed like she didn't know exactly where she was going or how to get there, but ultimately she did end up there. The pacing, it's a very quick paced book. There's not a lot of fluff in there. The beginning does start out a little bit slow, but it's really to build up not just the characters, but their backstory and all that. So the pacing is pretty quick. So this is not a thick book. This is like maybe 400 pages, 400 or 500 pages, I think, in hard copy. World building. So this is a little bit spoilery. So if you're not crazy about this part, just skip ahead a little bit. Like I said, it does take place in I think it's maybe the early 16th century Russia or somewhere around there. There's for the most part, but they do travel to like a fantasy world, almost like there's an alternate dimension, and this being is able to open a doorway between those two. It's good, but it's nothing, it's nothing mind-blowing or revolutionary. The prose is very simple. The prose meaning the writing style. I'd probably compare it to like Harry Potter. Maybe a little bit more complicated than that, or complex. Her vocabulary is obviously better because this isn't written for children, but it's kind of on par. It's not hard to read. It's not flowery writing. She wants to convey the information to the reader. And then the emotional impact. I think I gave this book like 4 stars on Goodreads. I think I gave it like a 7.5 out of 10. Something like that. It was pretty good. It wasn't just the best book I've ever read. It wasn't the best book of the year or anything like that. It was different and refreshing in comparison to some of the big epic fantasies that I've been reading. And I really like standalones, and there's not a whole bunch of them out there. It didn't have a huge emotional impact. I thought overall it was pretty good. Let's talk about the bad. So let's go back to characters. Some of the characters were really lacking. I think the male characters of the story were very shallow. I would have really liked to learn more about the Starrick King, I think is how you pronounce it. And the guy that Irina ends up betrothed to, his character could have been really cool. Miranadius or something like that. His character could have been really cool. And I would have liked to maybe see a little bit more, peer a little bit more into his background. So you learn about his motivations, because he's kind of the antagonist of the story. Plot. Like I said, it was fine, but there wasn't a whole lot that was like pressing that made you feel like, oh, I got to jump to the next chapter. And the pacing was good, but there were times where I could not stand how she jumped from different points of view. Like I said, there's really three main characters, and it's those three women. And the way, I guess this goes more into prose, or sort of a blend of both, but the way that she went from one character to another, it's very different than what I've seen in other books where ordinarily, you know, like right out the gate, whose point of view you're reading from. And in this, there's no real indicators. It's just the chapter starts, or maybe there's a break in the chapter. And then so you kind of know that there's going to be a POV shift, but there's nothing really to tell you who you're shifting to until, you know, maybe like a page and a half to 2 pages in, which I thought was interesting because you're kind of having to figure out whose point of view you're reading from. But it made it convoluted, and it was seemed like it was overcomplicated just for the sake of being different. I would have probably preferred to know ahead of time whose point of view I was reading from. But then leading more into the prose is that some of the points of view I thought were pointless. Instead of reading from Irina's point of view, we read from like her handmaiden's perspective, or rather than reading from Wanda, we read from one of her brothers, things like that. And it was just, like I said, it was just convoluted, made things just difficult to kind of piece together, especially when you could get the same information if you were just going from one of the three main characters. I would have preferred that, but again, that's a preference thing. That's the good and the bad. Let's talk about the ugly. What could be some worldliness or sinfulness that's maybe steeped into the work that might hold you back from reading this? And I'm happy to say there's not a lot. There's now, this is not a children's book. This is written for adult. There's mention, like there's some language in there. It's nothing really explicit. There's nothing that you're not going to hear on like a network television show. There are some passing references to like sexual assault happening to a prior character that we never really learn a whole lot about. And when you're reading from the perspective of three different women in particular, there's situations that a couple of these women get put in that can be uncomfortable for them. And as you're reading it, you kind of experience some of that discomfort, but that's the intention. But there's nothing explicit in nature. And so, again, I wouldn't recommend this to like a 14-year-old girl, but probably 15 and up. Maybe 16 and up, something like that, where they're a little more mature. I would recommend sort of that age range. But as far as like what types of sin are maybe steeped into it, I don't think there's really much of anything, especially not in consideration, or not when you're considering it's just real. The writer tries to make it as realistic as possible. So then we come to the ultimate question, which is, should Christians read it? Now, again, should meaning a moral obligation. Ought we or ought not? And this is going to come down to it depends. So, would I recommend this to a Christian of mine? It just depends on the person, but probably. I would say like I'm 80% confident I would recommend this to most Christians. There's a few people that maybe have some stronger convictions about, like, they want zero language in their books. They want zero mentioning of like different kinds of assault and things like that in their books. They don't, and that's understandable. For me, I would say I do feel comfortable recommending this to other people, and I'm actually going to recommend this to a friend of mine. I thought it was pretty good. Again, I don't think it's going to blow your hair back. I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads because I try to round up. I normally do an out of 10 scale. I gave it a 7.5. So it was pretty good. I probably won't reread it, but I do recommend it. And so the last thing that I'm going to put in this video, I'm going to try to continue to put in these videos, is what I listened to while reading this book, because with so much going on with me, or the times that I have available to me to read, it's normally not peace and quiet. And I either have to have peace and quiet, or I have to have something else that is drowning out all the other distractions. And so I'm going to put a link in the description of what I was listening to while I was reading this, just some ambience and stuff like that, if you're interested. So yeah, I thought it was pretty good. I think that if any of this sounds interesting to you, I recommend that you pick it up and give it a try. Otherwise, appreciate you guys watching. I'll see you guys on the next one.